People are saying that everything is a recession indicator on TikTok right now. People are convinced we're not only heading into, if not already in, a potentially worse financial situation than the pandemic, indicated by things like lipstick sales and the lack of people getting manicures, but that we've simultaneously been allowing conservative fashion trends to take over the trend cycle for years now. And both of those things are not only linked, but have equally serious impacts. And despite the fact that this discourse has evolved into a pretty funny social media trend, I think it's actually a topic worth breaking down and looking into further, because letting the slick back bun beauty trend take over our For You page has more potential impact than just increasing the risk of half the population becoming bald. So let's get into it. Before we do, welcome back to my channel. My name's Katie. I talk a lot about fashion, sustainable fashion, and consumer behavior online. If that sounds good to you, then subscribe to my channel, follow me on social media, but especially my Instagram account, where you can get involved in these videos by responding to the call out posts I do on my story, asking for your thoughts on the topic I'm going to be covering. And that's where a lot of the responses have come from this video you'll be seeing. So thank you to everyone who replied to the post for this video. And without further ado, let's get into it. First, and maybe because people might be skeptical about this, or maybe they're just not aware of the discourse happening online and how many individual trends have been discussed as potential indicators to a shift in fashion, let me brain dump some of the many examples from the past few months of rising conservatism or recessioncore happening specifically in fashion that I both have and haven't seen mentioned online. And little warning, some of these are maybe more accurate than others. Okay, so skinny bodies and silhouettes and fur and longer hemlines being trends on the runway. Every brand rushing to sell quiet luxury and very boring beige color palettes. The recent Vogue hairspray redo that was incredibly thin. And I guess linked to that, the rise of Ozempic. The fashion industry investing in traditional indicators of wealth like skiing and other sports. This one hurts, but the rise of natural materials. Bella Hadid and Beyonce Western fashion trends. Polka dots. The recent obsession with food marketing as an indicator of luxury. I'm just a girl or girl math shopping, the Charlotte York obsession, and natural beauty trends, which encompass a whole range of things like hair colors, natural long healthy nails, no mascara look, people removing their lip fillers and instead opting for naturally enhancing surgeries instead, etc, etc, etc. Whether or not they're accurate recession indicators, which we'll get to, all of them are indicators of a hyper feminine, very conservative aesthetic being back in a big way. And even for men, we've seen a parallel rise in hypermasculinity in fashion. Off the top of my head, because I don't know men's fashion as much, we've seen men's shirts and ties making its way back into menswear. We've seen zip-ups and polos and that kind of like very conservative aesthetic becoming the new trend. Even slacks and wider leg, smarter trousers taking over skinny jeans. And I'm sure if you dug into it deeper, you could find a whole host more. But okay, back to women's fashion specifically. Like I said, all of these examples have a very specific aesthetic in common. A very hyper feminine, traditional, conservative undertone that as a macro trend has pretty worrying impacts. I'd argue that before lockdown, we were seeing a growing interest in unisex fashion and a lot of tolerance around people dressing a little bit differently from gender norms. I'd also argue we saw a general step forward in inclusion and diversity on the runways, even though it definitely wasn't perfect. And these were all indicators that progress was being made and fashion was becoming a bit more democratic, I would say. But I think that's completely changed and it's been happening over the past 3, 4, 5 years. At least. And in some ways this has been quite subtle. I mean, size inclusivity has been slowly slipping down as though brands are hoping no one would notice. But more recently, I think there's been a lot more examples of brands doing away with this inclusivity. Like all of the fast fashion brands rebranding to very demure, very conservative aesthetics and leaning into cosplaying luxury, even though they're selling fast fashion. Fashion as a whole has become a lot more homogenized, a lot more bland and grey and workwear-ish, forgoing creativity and colour and setting themselves apart from others for the popular look. It's now not about fashion catering to as many different aesthetics as possible, but to the powerful, as the New York Times put it. And with the rise of this conservatism comes the expectation that women will conform to the traditional feminine look. And the consequence is that those who choose not to conform are left vulnerable to attacks and ridicule. The growing violence we're seeing towards transgender people and the growing fat phobia online are both examples of this. I think a really good depiction of this is the women allowed in the conservative US party and the women allowed around Trump. If women are allowed to exist in these spaces, which are very male dominated, it's in a very feminine but no nonsense way. Bouncy, blonde blowouts, high heels, overdone makeup, and skirt suits are the approved uniform, or severe and demure, as Vogue columnist summarized it. This increasing standard puts a lot of pressure on those trying to conform to the impossible standard of femininity. The time, money, and effort needed to look like what someone expects a woman to look like is a full-time job. And of course, it's always been linked to the trad wife lifestyle for this reason, because who can juggle all of this maintenance to look like this, as well as a career? And in a cost of living crisis too. All this to me makes it feel like there's no longer a democratization of fashion, if there ever was. Our choices are being limited down to the few greige workwear pieces brands all regurgitate. Brands are making a clear pivot towards exclusivity in their shows and runway events again, aiming to hold back the masses and cater to the few powerful people who can stand their increasing prices. And it's back to the same ultra thin, ultra feminine aesthetic we saw in and around the time of the last recession. Speaking of a recession, the recent buzz online, as I mentioned, has been about signaling which fashion trends are early indicators of us heading into a recession, a topic closely linked to the rise of conservatism, not just in consumer behavior and purchasing habits, but also in trending aesthetic. There's a lot of skepticism about whether fashion trends can actually track a recession, but for as long as changes in fashion trends have been recorded, experts have been able to link a rise in blander, corporate fashion and the popularity of people buying small luxuries to times of economic distress. One Instagram account I follow, called Data But Make It Fashion, highlighted 4 fashion and beauty trends that suggest a recession is imminent. These were longer hemlines, surges in lipstick sales, and minimalism and corporate core becoming major aesthetics. To be fair though, this may all be a moot point, considering we may have now moved past the need for early indicators of a recession. After Trump's tariff fiasco, experts now believe it's an inevitability. I think it's very classic Gen Z to make light of a situation that is going to have devastating impacts if it does come true. And despite this being a fairly accurate and pretty funny way for people to grapple with the effects of a recession and talk about it with others, Vogue seems to think this trend isn't everything it's being made out to be. According to one of their articles, not everything is a recession indicator like TikTok says it is. And the comeback of skinny silhouettes is actually just an example of the fashion cycle rather than a rise of conservatism or a recession indicator. But although they dismiss a lot of the TikTok discourse, they do go on in this article to list the recession indicators they think are actually accurate, like the rise of business casual being marketed as something to wear both to the office and to the club, which was this situation back in 2008 and seems to be an emerging theme now. If Stella McCartney's autumn-winter 2025 collection theme being from laptop to lap dance is any indication. Okay, so we've kind of discussed the discourse now. I want to discuss how much this actually matters. Because yeah, I think you can dismiss a lot of TikTok discourse as being just a funny trend, people being stupid online and not really meaning anything. But you can't ignore the fact that so many of our recent trends have been indicators of this overall shift towards a more reserved, more conservative fashion aesthetic. And that conservative inspired aesthetic has a deeper influence than just our wardrobes. And they also don't just influence the people who subscribe to that political belief. Fashion and beauty trends aren't limited by political or community groups. And trends originating and perpetuating these ideals have a way of making it into the wider zeitgeist. I think we only have to look at how minimalism has taken over the beauty industry to understand how this hyper feminine, conservative look has been behind almost every single recent trend. Like clean girl aesthetic, anti-aging, anti-wrinkle, the buzz around retinol, slick back buns, matcha, wellness, skinniness, no makeup, tattoo removal, etc, etc, etc. And unless you're looking at the big picture purposefully, unless you're connecting all of these trends to this umbrella macro trend of minimalism and conservatism and hyper femininity, the individual trends themselves aren't really red flags. On their own, they don't really point towards conservatism. And it took someone pointing this out in a viral TikTok back in November for a lot of people to finally make this link. One thing I want to discuss is how this is impacting us outside of our wardrobes. Because ignoring the very obvious rise of fascist and authoritarian and conservative governments gaining power literally across the world, the rise of conservatism in fashion and beauty might be just dismissed as nothing. Maybe just trend cycles naturally moving from one extreme to the other. And I might even agree if I didn't see it also influencing our behavior and the cultural conversation. Whether you like it or not, social media and TikTok especially has a major influence on the cultural zeitgeist. And the content we see on there has a major role for many in defining our behavior and our thoughts and our political beliefs, even subconsciously. And there's so many examples I can think of seemingly fashion and beauty trends having potentially deeper ties to the state of society, pointing to the fact maybe that these trends are a reflection of our behavioural changes rather than just aesthetic. For example, the rise of wellness, de-aging and skinniness in beauty are all indicators of the rising cultural celebration of self-restraint. And this links very well to my food as a luxury indicator in fashion video that I did recently, which some people actually pointed out in the comments how this was linked to the rise of the Ozempic and how it was a way of indulging yourself with fashion because we're being told not to indulge ourselves with food right now. And these trends in fashion and beauty have clear links to the rise of tradwife content becoming popular in other aspects of our culture, which fashion and beauty can't even deny the link of because they've partnered with influencers like Nara Smith, who are pushing these lifestyles. Another example I want to talk about, might be controversial, is the office siren trend and whether it's an infantilization of women in the workplace. The focus of the office siren trend is rooted in desirability, which is a key theme in conservative fashion ideals. But the result is sexualizing our roles in the workplace. And I think you could argue as well that there are other reasons why this trend became popular. Maybe it's because the rise of office wear is linked to times of recession and economic insecurity because people don't have money to buy both things for the office and things for real life. Or maybe it's because people are tying our fashion trends to office wear because having a job in today's economy is actually a flex in itself. That was someone's opinion I saw online. I thought that was really interesting. In my opinion, I think it's all three, but I'd be interested in hearing yours. And finally, the most obvious example I want to mention has to do with the mass shift we're seeing from fast fashion brands starting to cosplay as luxury. Obviously, on the surface, blazers and maxi skirts and lots of beige colours fit into the very buttoned up conservative aesthetic that has been the macro trend for a while now. But it goes deeper than that, I think. Pretty Little Thing doesn't want to sell bodycon dresses anymore because no one's going to the club. Gen Z aren't drinking, the nightlife industry is struggling, and Brat Girl Summer lasted about 2 minutes on TikTok. Now it's all about making sure you're in bed by 9 p.m. with your chin strap on and overnight cream slathered on your face, ready to wake up at 6 a.m, de-shed and go to your morning Pilates class, all in the guise of wellness and again, self-restraint. There's so much more I could talk about with this topic. I find it really interesting. And I think it has links to a lot of different topics I've covered on my channel. I can see the undercurrent of conservatism and recession indicators in so many of the topics I've covered on here. But anyway, let's wrap this video up with my final thoughts, key takeaways, what we can maybe be doing to fight this. Obviously, allowing conservative behavior and ideals to spread online under the guise of TikTok trends is not great. And I think we need to be taking it a little bit more seriously. TikTok is a powerful machine with massive cultural influence, masquerading behind silly little dancing outfit videos and girl math cutesy talk. I mean, if someone rebranded the Handmaid's Tale uniform into burgundy instead of red, slapped some bows on it, styled it with a slick back bun rather than that bonnet, and called it their go-to capsule wardrobe, it would do numbers on TikTok. It also worries me seeing the fashion industry regress on diversity and inclusivity and creativity, to be fair, in favor of all of them peddling the same greige workwear inspired aesthetic. It's disappointing not only for us citizens, but for the small designers who don't want to create the same bland uniform as every other brand is selling. So, okay, let's talk about what we can do. And if I'm being honest, I don't have a master plan, but I think there are some things. Like, for example, if you want to protest this entire conservative aesthetic by wearing the loudest, boldest, brightest colors and doing your hair in crazy ways, then go for it. I think that's amazing. If it's not your style and you don't want to protest by changing your wardrobe, I think that's also cool. And it's not what I'm asking you to do, to throw away clothes you might have bought already, because that wouldn't even solve the issue. And it's also very wasteful. As we've kind of hinted at, it's less about these actual fashion trends and more about the overall mass aesthetic and lifestyle that they're pushing on us under the guise of a TikTok trend. And one of the ways I think we can track this conservative spread of fashion is just being more aware of it and calling it out more. Not like literally going to someone's TikTok page and being really rude to them, but just like engaging in more discussions and trying actively to look deeper into brand new fashion trends and see what message they might be perpetuating or what aesthetic they really fit under. As I said, it's not a master plan, and feel free to comment your thoughts on what other things you think we could do, or like just any thoughts on what I've covered today. I had a fun time researching this video, to be fair, and I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I'd love to talk about it more, so let me know if you want more of this kind of commentary. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a lovely day. If you want to watch another video, the one on screen is the one YouTube thinks you want to watch, but if not, I will speak to you really, really soon. Bye!